Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another beautiful session of the Hearth Within. We are very proud today to have five poets with us who have just released their wonderful new books from Red River. And so we entitled this session as a Guftagu with five Red River poets. So Red River, as a publication house, has been doing wonderful work, especially in poetry, in a place where we do not have, in a country where we do not have a specialized poetry publisher. We have not had a specialized poetry publisher for long. Red River has really been very revolutionary in bringing poetry across the country and for promoting a number of new and very potent voices. So we are very glad that we have this evening five Red River poets who have published their wonderful new volumes and who will talk about them and, of course, read from their collection. We're also very happy to have a wonderful audience with us, and we hope that as the session progresses, we will have very fruitful discussions and fruitful conversations relating to these poems, these books, and what these poets think about poetry. So welcome once again to the Hearth Within. And to begin the session, I would like to invite Bhumika. And the idea is that Bhumika introduces her fabulous new book to us, The Language of Unhealed Wounds. And I'll just introduce Bhumika to our lovely audience here. So Bhumika R has taught English language and literature at the undergraduate and postgraduate level for 3 years. In August 2022, she decided to focus her energies on writing and translation. She writes poetry and short fiction in English, and many of her writings have been published in various literary magazines. She also translates poetry and fiction from Kannada into English and vice versa. Her Kannada translation of Malaswamy Jacob's Meso-English novel Zorami is in press and might hopefully be available for readers around early 2024. The Language of Unhealed Wounds is her debut poetry collection that we bring up for discussion today. Currently, she's working on the translations of M.S. Murthy's Kannada novel Baul and N. Sandhya Rani's Kannada novel Ishtukala, Ottigidu, to English. She's also associated with the Plato's Cave Design team since September 2023. She lives between Jammu and Bangalore, and for the time being, we are very, very happy that she's with us and here to talk about her new book. So Bhumika, over to you, and we are eagerly looking forward to what you think about The Language of Unhealed Wounds. Welcome.
Thank you very much. First of all, thanks to everyone, and specifically to Dibyajyoti Sarma, Basudhara Roy ma'am, and Jaideep sir. Thanks for this opportunity, and thanks to Red River Press for giving a home to my work. So I'll not speak too much about my work because I'd rather have the readers tell me how they read, and I would be interested in listening to their interpretation or their reading. But very briefly, some of the aspects that I'm concerned about, that I try to engage with, are about, cold cruelty, which we seem to have accepted as the norm, or we don't seem to be affected by it. And it's shocking. It doesn't surprise, it doesn't stun us. And everyday life for me is very important, and the disruption caused in the terrain of everyday life in whatever ways or means through oppressive forces at the macrocosmic, microcosmic level, so on and so forth, and the hypocrisies that each one of us, the kinds of hypocrites we are, it just amuses me. So some of these are what I try to engage with around the world that I see, the people, so on and so forth. But I would leave it to the reader. So I don't want to impose my thoughts on the reader because I would prefer the reader telling me their reading. I'll just be reading 3 poems, and if time permits, another one. Each of these poems belong to 3 different sections. The first one is Fermented Snack. Words wrapped in pashmina and laced with a class 2 preservative is offered at the altar of a dying world Will the words rot or ferment, altering their flavor and turning them acidic? A numb, dying world insulated in a laboratory with controlled conditions, unaware of its own slow death. Meanwhile, these words are now fermenting. An acidic smell emanates from the pashmina wrapped package, a sharp flavored, tangy snack that a hungry passerby relishes, chewing each bit, slowly watching the world clumsily crawl towards death. Uh, Another is the title of this collection, that is also the title of this poem. Uh, the language of unhealed wounds. In what language do scabs of old unhealed wounds choose to speak? Are they mere patches of dried skin, or simply a stubborn scar that has chosen to stay, reminding you of old wounds? Sometimes beneath a dried scab is a mixture of blood and pustule, seeking to dry, seeking to heal, and failing miserably in each attempt. Every unhealed wound will either choose its own language to speak or simply choose not to speak at all. And uh, the third poem is from the third section of this collection. It's titled Barcodes and Hatted Heads. Their heads bent, countless human like figures drive automobiles, hang on to the railings of sanitized metros, and some walk hurriedly. They move around everywhere. Do they raise their heads ever? Do they know who lives next door? You ask too many questions. They don't care actually. There isn't much time. They are very sincere workers. What do these figures eat for breakfast? Well, it doesn't matter to us, all right? But do they eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner? Oh my, that doesn't matter to us either. All right, but do they fall sick? Perhaps they do, but who cares? These creatures are numbered and encoded. Try reading them like you scan a QR code or a barcode on that cosmetic you purchased last week at the mall. You'll then probably know their age, height, weight, blood group, and also the street they live in. It is that simple. I don't know how they look. Maybe they all look the same. It doesn't matter to me. They don't seem to know how to lift their heads up. They are dead a long time ago. Maybe they leave their faces behind when they wake up dead. The barcode creatures have no voice either. Never heard them speak ever. Look at the pretty caps and pointed hats tied to their shoulders as they walk with their heads bent, beautifully encoded, faceless figures. If I have time, I read another poem towards the end if I have time. But thank
Yes, we
you
will
very
come back for another round, Bhumika. And
much.
those were very, very powerful poems, I think, very representative of the volume that you're talking about and the idea that is very central to it, as you said, the callousness, the cold violence, the indifference that cakes us day in and day out, especially the last poem that you read. Thank you very much, because these are, questions that we must bring up, especially when you relate the idea of numbers and the QR code and the barcode and the kind of mechanization that we encounter every day. So it's pointless asking questions like whether they eat or whether they fall sick, because nobody really wants to answer them. Thank you, and we'll come back for another round.
Thank you very much, ma'am.
The next poet that we are going to have speak here is Nishi Pulugurtha. And Nishi Pulugurtha has recently brought out a collection. Sorry, I'm very sorry. Yes. The next poet that we have is Nishi Pulugurtha, and she has recently brought out a collection that is titled Looking. Nishi Pulugurtha is academic, author, poet, and occasional translator. She is Associate Professor in English at Brahmananda Keshab Chandra College, Kolkata, with several academic publications to her credit. Her publications include a collection of essays on travel, Out in the Open, an edited volume of essays on travel, Across and Beyond, 3 volumes of poems, The Real and the Unreal and Other Poems, Raindrops on the Periwinkle, and this third collection, Looking. She has also co-edited a volume of poems called Voices and Vision, the first IPPL anthology, a collection of short stories called The Windowsill, an edited volume of critical essays titled Literary Representations of Pandemics, Epidemics, and Pestilence, published by Routledge in 2023. Her recent book is a volume of essays written during the pandemic called Lockdown Times. She is currently writer in residence at the Samyukta Research Foundation and is joining us from there. She is the secretary of the Intercultural Poetry and Performance Library, Kolkata, and a member of the advisory board of the Alzheimer's and Related Disorders Society of India, Calcutta chapter. We are very, very grateful that she's with us and to talk about her new poems, Looking. Just to add a personal bit to it, Nishi Pulugurtha is also a photographer. So the idea of looking, carries double meaning when she talks about, the visual and the verbal together. So I hope we get that also from you. Over to you, Nishi.
Thank you so much, Boshudhara, for that kind introduction. Thank you to the Hearth Within, to Joydeep and Boshudhara. And a big thank you to Dibbojyoti for everything. And the last line that you spoke about, that I'm also a photographer, and the fact that I look through several lenses at various points of time is, I think, something that Dibbojyoti noticed. And I'm really very thankful to him for bringing that aspect in, because when this book was, when we were working on this book, he wanted photographs that I had clicked at various points of time to be part of the book. And, he even had asked me to label the photograph with the poem that it would go best with. And as I began to do that, I knew that before, but then once I sat down to do that, I began to notice that even more clearly that several of my poems actually began with my looking at them in various ways. And you can actually see photographs that tell what the poem is, give you some idea of what the poem is. So I think this was not the original title that I had in mind, but I'm really thankful to Dibbojyoti for coming up with this. And I'm really happy that Looking is the one that even I decided on, because that's exactly what it is about. It encapsulates the very essence of my poems, which are not just about looking at things, but looking deeper into things, into the heart of things, and trying to find connections between various images, ideas, sensations. And as most of my poetry has to do with life as it happens around me at various points of time. Most of the poems in this particular volume were written in 2020. And a time that had been very, very difficult for most of us. Not all of them, but most of them were written during that point of time. So it talks about life during those times, and it also talks about various associations of nostalgia, of memory, of the past. And memory is a very important idea in my poetry, not only the looking back, not only the idea of traveling back, but also the fact of what happens when the memory is disturbed, when that's completely slowly and completely obliterated over a period of time, because there are several poems in this volume also which have dementia as their theme. I have not demarcated them specifically. There are 3 sections in the poem, so you have to read and understand which is which. I'm glad that it's that way, so that, as Bhumika said, I would always like readers to read and find out associations, and it's always nice to have another perspective to what one writes. So these are poems which talk about life as it meanders, life as it hangs around, observations about things that I see around me, about my reactions to various kinds of things that are happening around me. And of course, at times in some of the poems, the quarantine, the lockdown times does rear its head, but it's not just about those times as well. It goes beyond those times, because anything and everything can be, kind of connected and associated the moment you add an image or the moment you add a phrase somewhere. So I hope that readers would read and find these assonances and these connections and associations. Do I read poems now, Boshudhara?
Maybe you can read a couple of short poems, and then we'll come back for another round.
Okay. The first one that I'll read has the word quarantine in its title. It's called A Different Time, a Quarantine. A different time, a quarantine of caring for the infirm and old, of face and body covered with marks that distorted and yet revealed a festering soul that cared not, of mistrust and suspicion, of itches and rashes and blisters. Another time, another quarantine, of contagion and some chicken stew, of troubling relationships festering, of holding on, of struggles no one noticed, no one could, all masked, of pain, bitterness, and some mean, of working hard to heal the scabs that could be seen, that unseen remains, festering, disturbing, of trying times and reaching out, of life going awry, yet holding on, a different time, a quarantine. The next poem that I'll read is called The Wild White Flower. It looks like a small forest with the green all overgrown. A couple of mongoose walk out from it and rush back as they see fit. Amidst all that disorder, I see a wild plant whose name I do not know, whose name I am not keen to know too. Big, wide leaves that maze around, and a white, long, slender bud waiting to spread out. The layers seem to hold on, wait, as we all wait, as the minutes move on, as life drags on, the wilderness all around. The last one that I will read as of now is called Stones That Tell Tales. Stones held together, large rectangular ones, that have been bound closely for over 400 years now. The stones seem to speak about history, about people, stories that need to be told, stories that need to be heard. The tales they tell reverberate, wrecked in places with order disrupted, harmony broken, as they stand still, spectators to all that had been, to all that is still there. The large outer wall, a strong structure that encircles, embraces in its folds bare, rugged, brown. Outside, leaning on the wall, on a small raised platform, jutting out, Two young boys sit with orange lollies in hand, a red cycle in front. The banyan tree with its roots that hang a banner on its branches swing gently in the winter breeze. The glistening water of the nearby pond and that other tree in the corner, its branches all bare, sentinel. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishi, for those beautiful poems, and we could almost see the pictures behind it. So I think it's a good conversation. The book, when you read it, would be a good conversation between the picture and the poem. And we could almost see the pictures, especially the wild plant. So from Nishi Pulugurtha, we will move over to our third poet for the evening. That's Paulami Sengupta. Paulami has a wonderful book called Maximum Love in Patel Nagar. Paulami Sengupta is a publishing professional based in Kolkata. Her poems in English and Bengali and translations have been published in The Dreaming Machine, Nether, Muse India, and the Sunflower Literary Collective. She has co-translated the Bengali edition of Salom, Woman of Vela, by Adina Karasik. Her recent collection of Bengali poems under her pen name Anjashi is titled Bayoshondhir Haraf. Both these two books, that is her Bengali book and Maximum Love in Patel Nagar, have a few Bengali poems which Paulami has translated into English and vice versa. The poem My Bag has been showcased in Rucksack, a global poetry patchwork, an art installation project curated by Ant J. Sten. We are very, very happy that Paulami is here with us to talk about her wonderful book, which has a very interesting title, and I hope that she will introduce the title to us. Over to you, Paulami.
Thank you, Boshudhara and Joydeep, for organizing this event. And for a poet, the best thing is interacting with other poets and getting to read other people's poems. So I thank Red River and Dibyajyoti immensely for this, because this is all a poet wants, like to respond, to see how other people read her or his poets, and to get a chance to read other people's poetry. I'll talk a bit about Maximum Love in Patel Nagar. As in any other poetry collection, there are multiple themes, but one main theme or one main strain in the book would be definitely tussle between pleasure and anxiety. So one way in which I can define my poetry is, the dilemma I face when I really want to connect to my surrounding, when I really want to connect with friends, neighbors, and everyone around, whether in a familiar or an unfamiliar space. And suddenly there are inhibitions which pull me back. So I'll give you a small example. So I was in Delhi for 11 years. And so that's where my poetry collection is based, maybe Maximum Love in Patel Nagar. So suppose you are shopping in a place like Sarojini Nagar, which is a very popular shopping destination. And, it's the weather is really nice and it's a colorful market, and, you really feel like enjoying yourself. But suddenly you hear something being played out from the police booth. Don't touch unidentified objects. Beware of strangers. Beware of this. Suppose you board the metro, which is very, very pretty and, very well organized. Again, you hear people saying on the microphone that, beware of pickpockets. And this could be a bomb. That could be a bomb. So that is where the problem starts, that I really want to go out. And suddenly I have this inhibition, like, is it really safe? There are other inhibitions also, but this is the first layer. So that is what I wanted to, I believe my poetry collection sums up Maximum Love in Patel Nagar. Patel Nagar being the neighborhood where I really want to connect, and love being something which I want to share, which I want to get from others, and the complexities surrounding it. So I'll just read two short poems from the collection. So this is knowing in Patel Nagar. I can smell my neighbor's soap. Houses are that close in Patel Nagar. Antiseptics and detergents intersect nonchalantly as our bathrooms step onto each other. One day we might meet, put faces to the non-white noise, exchange borderline pleasantries without mentioning, I know you use pairs. But right now, let's not get bothered about the sounds of someone gargling or throwing up in another building. Okay, one more. This is titled The Bad Teacher. The bathroom mirror smells like sea when I look at it before an afternoon class. Old dreams rush against my knees, drilling the sand around my ankles in aqueous madness. Books wiped clean of serial notes, pieces of chalk demand pure knowledge, but my lessons lisp in memories of my glistening appetite. 160 eyes punctuate the hour of a bad teacher. So, thank you.
Wonderful, beautiful poems, Uh, very realistic, the classroom and then the architecture of flats in cities where there's hardly any privacy, and the walls are almost permeable. So very beautiful descriptions, Paulami. Thank you. And we'll come back for another round of poetry and discussions. While we move over to our fourth poet for the evening, that is Smitha Sehgal, who has a very interesting collection of poems titled How Women Become Poems in Malabar. So introducing Smitha. Uh, Smitha Sehgal is a legal professional serving in a Navratna Central Public Sector undertaking of the Government of India. She belongs to Calicut, the seaside city of Malabar, which has a rich cultural and literary tradition, and has resumed writing after 25 years. And her poems have been widely featured in contemporary literary publications such as Ink, Sweat and Tears, Tiger Moth Review, Almost Island, Acropolis Journal, the Indianapolis Review, and elsewhere. Through her poems, she seeks to voice the concerns of women and restore their dignity beyond their statuses. How Women Become Poems in Malabar is her first collection of poems. Her poems have also been nominated as Best of the Net by 3 prestigious journals in 2023. We have been reading Smitha's poems on Facebook for quite some time, and we are very glad that Smitha has come out with this beautiful collection. The title, of course, reminds me of Kamala Das, Hot Noon in Malabar. And Smitha, we invite you to talk about this beautiful book.
Thank you very much, Vasudhara. First of all, let me acknowledge this program by thanking you and Jaideep Sarangi sir for bringing it all together, and of course Dibya Jyoti Sharma of Red River. And while we've been interacting with some of you here, like Vasudhara, Nishi ma'am, for quite some time, it's the first time probably we are all getting together across on a platform. So and Tansy is there. I've been talking to Tansy for quite some time, and this is the first time we are here in the common platform. So I'm very, very glad to be here. Thank you. How Women Become Poems. This collection of poems is, I would say, my return to my roots. That is after 25 years. I was born and raised in Malabar. Malabar is akin to Macondo, what Gabriel Garcia Marquez has portrayed with the single word Macondo, whatever images comes in our mind. Malabar, I would say, something like that. So I was born and raised in Malabar, and blessed with the natural abundance, I think that it would have been very hard to be oblivious to the charm of poetry. And Kerala has a very rich tradition of poetry in the sense that each child is given an inculcation in poetry through very indigenous groups like Sahitya Samajams or the Akshara Shlogam, which is memorizing the shlokas, the poetry. So all of this has instilled in me deep love for poetry and appreciation for poetry. But of course, during the 1980s, writing poetry was very different from what it is today. Today, there are a lot of literary magazines. The avenues are more to be featured. In 80s, probably Nizam Ezekiel's Pen magazine was the only prominent magazine that featured English poetry, as far as I can remember. So now, why the title, How Women Become Poems in Malabar? Because every woman goes through a struggle. While writing this poem, while writing this collection, I've had visitations from the women with whom I've grown up with, women who have sacrificed their lives, women who have given up everything and been branded immoral or characterless. These are the women who deserve to be restored with their dignity. And we also know that the rich tradition of poetry in India seeks to bind women in the parenthesis of being beautiful or soft-spoken. It is these cliched images that we have to overcome, or if I may say, we have to break. So I would read a poem from this collection. The title of the poem is Vineyards. The town whore had a beautiful name, bless her soul. Morality of the brutal smiles of language, leaning towers counted her many lovers in the clock of the sea, and the freckled children, the stink of carrion in the thick gravy of summer. Except perhaps the time my father said, what a beautiful toddler she was once, and how he had held her in his hands. A pale gauze of pink around the noon, creak of wind-swept pine trees. Once I heard a voice, cotton candy blotting up the intoxicated sea, and everything inside. Languid secrets at the rusted gate, she and her new lover from the vineyards. Those nonchalant red suns on her alabaster skin that smelt of gardenias. Also, I would say that, as I said, the return to the language. Malayalam is a language which I sing inside my head every day. Because I'm so removed from my language, my culture, I carry it in my head every day. So the second poem is Red Husk. The title is Red Husk. So the poem is, so you see, we always peppered our laughter with an ayyo. In dying jasmine flowers, strung, taunting, Arabian sea swirling beneath our feet, drawing earth. We pickled our sorrows with an ayyo. Tangiers palm toddy, brought down in clay pots, stored in dark cellars of memory. We salted and smoked our wounds with an ayyo. In the wood-planked attic, flesh stinging, flaring, throbbing, shrinking, leaving indelible buds on earth's skin. We sugared crumbs of our love with an ayyo, letting ants climb over walls of silence when the rain broke into the summer nights like a thief. Hot, humid taste of char on our tongue rolled in ayyo. Strange annotations of primordial rituals, tremor of sea fever, lilting songs of daily conversation. Ayyo is more than a word or sound you would ever browse through in a dictionary. It is the red husk that clings to my grain. Thank you. I think, Basudhara, I'll come back to another poetry in the second round.
All right. Yes, we'll have another round, of course. So thank you, Smitha, for introducing your lovely book and your poems. And yes, a lawyer writing poetry is bound to have some element of activism in it. So glad to, get that connection as well. And we now introduce ourselves to the last poet of the evening, that is Tansy Troy. And we are very eager to hear from her. So introducing Tansy.
Thank you, Vasudha.
Yes, just a second. Tansy Troy has lived and worked in India as an educator and performer, writer and poet for these past 7 years. Though her connection with India stretches back to her childhood, when she spent many moons traveling the subcontinent with her mother in search of rare handloom textiles. This is her first poetry collection titled Ratna Kosha, and it explores the notions of memory, home, and dwelling, and how love and friendship contribute to forming these vital bonds. Tansy, we are very glad that you are here with us, and we look forward to listening to you on your new book. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Vasudha. And I'm in such amazing company this evening. I feel very, very blessed and very honored. All the poets so far have just been amazing. And it's really wonderful to hear as well as read your words in Divyaji's beautiful editions. Like, I love all of them so far. I've looked through everybody's works, but hearing you speak your poems is a really different thing. And it's lovely to hear them live. So, just to do with home and hearth and fires and all of these kind of notions, they've been swirling around in my brain this week. I've been in Manali, at my home in Manali, and this idea of kind of coming together as poets around a hearth, around a fire, to share our work has been really, really kind of poignantly speaking to me, because I've just been thinking a lot about what that means to have a home and a hearth, especially as a foreign national, or as somebody kind of living in India but not born in India. And one of the main things that I experience is that my home, even in India, is in so many different places. I mean, I'm constantly on the move. And I think it's something that's very much part of our modern lives, that we are very busy, nomadic people, and we're always kind of moving and on the move. So where does that leave the hearth, and where does that leave the fire that we come together around? I mean, pretty much it does end up being a bit of a digital fire in the kind of case of Zoom meetings and technology. Not to say that there's anything wrong with that, but as we've been traveling today, I've been actually kind of stopping off to kind of think about this meeting and to come to it. And along the roadside, there are, of course, all the many fires that people burn in Himachal at this time of year as the nights draw in and it gets colder in the evening. And I've just been thinking about, should we just pull over in the car, and should I read my poems from by the side of the road at a fireside, just so there's a bit of live fire in the scene. So I've just been thinking about how we can bring some real elemental magic to the whole world of poetry in our very digital age. And Ratna Kosha is really a collection of my kind of collection of jewels that I've found along the way on these nomadic travels around India, and also in England and in different countries of the world that I've lived or worked in. And Divyaji, I'm so grateful to Divyaji for allowing me to collect them all together in one beautiful volume that he's designed so gorgeously. I mean, every time I look at the cover, I feel really delighted, because it's just such a pretty and gorgeous, colourful scene on the front cover. And this also sort of means a lot to me, because I've been a very private poet up to now. I haven't really published in journals. I haven't really sent poems out into the world before this year. And I was always of the opinion that poetry was a very private thing until very recently, when I've realized it can be shared and it can be spoken aloud and it can be enjoyed by many all together. So that was something new for me, that was discovered through meeting Divya and through publishing with Red River. And I think just to bring all these mad thoughts together, I think that one of the things I've been looking for inside the covers of Ratnakosha have been my experiences of nomadism and of travel, really, and how different people in India, maybe they don't all have a hearth, and maybe they don't all have a home, and maybe there are birds and animals on our amazing subcontinent that also migrate or travel from one place to another, and have different experiences of where hearth and home really is, or multiple experiences of them, should I say. So the poems that I've chosen are specifically about those people or creatures who are not necessarily based in one place. It was really interesting to hear Paulama's idea of kind of maximum love in Patel Nagar, which feels like a very localized energy, you know, and a very, very specific kind of living next to many neighbors. But my experiences are quite far flung, as you'll hear. So my first poem that I'd like to read to you all is called Gypsy Christmas in Manali. It was written last year on observing a group of peoples who come up from Rajasthan when it's winter time, actually in the summer as well, and they camp by these huge electricity pylons that are really, really dangerous, and everywhere are notices saying beware of death, beware of radiation death, and you know, it's like quite dramatic. And yet this is the place where certain peoples have been advised to pitch their tents, their nomadic tents. So this really resonated with me, that these people are living in such a space and having Christmas, this kind of very celebratory, homely, decorated festival in such a place. So my vision of them and what they said to me, how they spoke to me, came over like this. Gypsy Christmas in Manali. One tent remains under the pylon, cautioning death and radiation. Tarpaulin flaps in teeth of winter, embers and ashes glow within, matriarch huddles a pot. Outside, some other mother stitches a mattress in meagre sun. These are the rough folk, the wild ones who skin unwitting, roaming animals, then splay their hides to dry. Nomadic eyes, by turn sharp and dull, furtive or resigned. Now the last tent has gone. Only clouds spread out their oracles where the gypsies spent their Christmas. Just a pile of smouldering sticks. 6 infants up a tree. Ghosts appearing by broad day as laughter on the air. So that was one set of nomads. Another set of nomads that I love and see often at the traffic lights in Delhi whenever we travel down to Delhi at the weekends to do performances are a family of performing children who jump up at our rickshaw every time we pass. We know them really well now. So we kind of give them I don't know, whatever we're carrying, crisps or sweets or something like that as we go by. But at first, when I saw them, I was like, wow, look at this family of entertainers who just could be on the stage, could be on any theatre stage, but actually they're performing for everybody at the traffic lights. So it's another kind of nomadic family. Don't know where they live, don't know if they have a fire at night, don't know if it's a roadside fire, not sure. But this family at the lights, whooping and cartwheeling, they come, flying to beat of twig on drum. Traffic light gymnasts writhe, contort through small steel hoops, cheeks high-fevered, bright with rouge, and eyes too wide with kohl. No bones to break, though tires screech and drivers holler and riders look the other way in grim indifference. Customer smile pervades. The youngest green-eyed goddess, with her strong penchant for gold, points out my wedding ring. On the tightrope in the Mela car park, she balanced for hours on the line, though drumbeat darkness, pot on head and pole in hands, clinging with tenacious souls, electrocuted monkey. Fumes engulf, rupees chink, lights change, the children sit by the side of the road in the dust, fueled by a hunger for names writ large, in any other lights but these. And lastly, this evening, I mean, we may have time to come back, but I'd just like to do a little bit of a change from the human condition to one of the birds who live on the campus where I work. And so this is a place in Rohtak in Haryana, which used to be wetland, which used to be a marshland, and still has a wonderful diversity of birds. And we live and we work there and we play there, and we do all the things that everybody does on a campus. But these birds come back to nest in their original nesting spots year on year. And the lapwings in particular, the red-wattled lapwings, fascinate me because they come back to almost the exact same nesting spots. I've been living there now 7 years on that campus, and I've just noticed every single year certain birds coming back to the almost same place, and trying desperately to bring up babies, even though the conditions and the environment have changed so much since their original marshland existed. So this is a poem in prose. I'm just going to read the first bit, but it's very close to my heart, the way that the birds kind of inform us and our writings as poets by their song and by their daily reference to singing and making music in our poetic lives. This is a lapwing. We took this wetland from you. This is your turf, your hood, your land. In our grand designs, sweeping vistas, new Raj plazas, we drain to the quick, bulldoze all the sanctity of your ancestral grounds. Yet still you've returned to your nesting place. Are you confused, bewildered, outraged, defiant, or simply pulled back by magnetism too strong to resist? Each year we find you, lapwing, nesting, incubating, or bringing up baby, shrieking when anyone approaches. The first year, a football smashed your eggs. The second, insane heat and no shade. Mother bird, you gasped, open-beaked, yet refused to budge from those precious eggs. That time, they did not hatch. Third time around, the rains arrived while the kids stayed home, and you and your precious mate got to hustle chicks around a playground, finally reclaimed. Thank you so much.
Beautiful poems, Tansy. Wonderful. And so we have had one entire round of reading and, talking about these fabulous poetry collections. And I have been thinking that, because, the kind of poems that were read out, it's very clear that Paulami and Smitha, both of them, they base their books within a particular location. So Paulami is talking about Patel Nagar and Smitha is talking about Malabar. But then I believe that the idea of place, overshadows all these 5 collections. Because, looking is about looking. And this idea of looking is also place-based, as Nishi Pulugurtha is talking about her travels and her, the intercity and the intracity travels and the various locations that, she's trying to capture in her poems. And Tansy also talks about this nomadic existence, and she's focusing on life in various pockets, the environmental life and the life of human beings. And I believe that Bhumika's poems are largely, overshadowed by the life that she leads in Kashmir. So it's a very, the kind of conflict zone that she inhabits there probably fuels these poems. So generally, for the second round, I'd like to pose this question to every poet. How do they see this interaction between place and poetry in their work? So you have already spoken about your books. You could maybe read out a couple of poems in this round as well, talking about place. And in general, if you could just tell us how, the idea of living in a particular place or belonging to a particular place or being in a particular place, how does it influence your poems as a whole, your poetic vision as a whole, and this particular collection that you have just brought to the world? So can we begin with Bhumika?
Thank
Right.
you.
Yes.
Well, it's I got back to writing while I was in Delhi. So I think what I'm largely guided by is JNU and what I learned while being a part of it, and as life later on. I've lived in different cities, so my experiences, my understanding in whatever limited ways, and also of conflict spaces, not Kashmir alone, but also Northeast India, which I'm very much interested in. So everyday life is something which interests me, and across place, it does not concern any specific place as such. And about the understanding of life and the apathy, which and the way in which we take everything and everyone around us for granted, the calculated nature of relationships and how we connect with people if we have to garner a favor from them for whatever reasons, and the cold cruelty. Right? So this is not about a place, but yes, this is about various places and my understanding of life as I've been hopping around cities. So yeah.
Yes, Bhumika. So if you could just read another couple of poems from your beautiful book.
Thank you, ma'am.
I'd also encourage the audience, to type questions in the chat box if they have any, or to raise their hands and we can invite them to ask questions.
Yeah. Since Basudhara Roy ma'am mentioned about J&K and my understanding, I think one poem which is about the truck drivers. Very often we see trucks lined up on the national highway leading from Jammu to Srinagar, and this continues for 2-3 days, whether it's a festival or otherwise, and no one cares about them, what they eat, and whether it rains, whether it's summer, whether it's very cold. They are alive, basically, and what could be going on in their minds, them as human beings, not just truck drivers. It's titled NH44. Small puddles reflect multi-hued diesel or petrol-laced water. A long, disciplined line of trucks, one behind the other, in a neat straight line. The line has grown longer since the day before, no longer a straight line. Slowly, the trucks spread and spill over into the highway, leaving a narrow stretch for anyone who wishes to walk, cross, or drive their non-truck looking vehicles. 3 trucks loaded to the brim with not so fresh vegetables and fruits, 2 with cattle, and 1 with iron bars for construction of either a house or a shop. 2 more loaded with household goods of someone relocating to Kashmir, and some seem empty. No clearance, landslide, bad weather, poor visibility, security check, stay. The truckers are informed through some kind of pass on the message game by someone far ahead in the line of stranded trucks. A kerosene stove is being pumped to life. Onions and green chilies are chopped for a meal. Did you say unhygienic and filthy? They are hungry, Sir Ji, Madam Ji. Freshly made rotis minus the dal, but some onion, green chilies, and a pickle. A cleaner holds a tiny stamp-sized photograph of a child. My niece, haven't seen her in many months, he says, in between chewing his roti. My mother was ill when I started about nearly 2 weeks ago as a driver, staring at nothingness, or maybe just the road ahead, blocked by other trucks. Huge tarpaulins, old multicolored pieces of cloth spread beneath their truck. Drivers and cleaners sleep, dreaming of home and a cup of morning tea. Uh, may I just read one more
Yes, yes,
poem?
of course, please. Yes.
This, uh, this emerged from my own, trying to understand how fair is it when I'm working with the Northeast, when and my research area happens to be Northeast India and literatures from there. The question of ethics, am I just, understanding from a certain point of view? Am I just writing something that I'm imagining? So, uh, jumbled sentence stories, alphabets floated as if from Aladdin's lamp, letters into words and words into sentences, whispered by the nameless people, packed tightly into ill fitting, square shaped containers. Where are they headed? Are they travelers? Well, perhaps traveling in neat, straight lines, they whisper softly. That's when letters, words, and sentences begin to float around, jumbled sentences. Who? Me. Free. Should. You. I. Teller. Stories. Here. Think. As I struggle to piece it together, some more whispered words, sentences, spread their wings and fly haphazardly. More jumbled sentences giggle into my ears. Here are stories. I stop rearranging them, listening instead to the stories being told in jumbled sentences. Thanks for your time.
Thank you for that beautiful poem, Bhumika. So, Bhumika, there's a question from Kabir for you in the chat box,
Oh,
and you will
I'll just
contemplate on the question. We will come back to you. So, we give you time to contemplate on the question and to answer, after this round. So, I hope you can see the question.
yeah, I
Yeah.
can, ma'am.
Okay, yes. So while Bhumika contemplates on Kabir's question, thank you, Kabir. We also have a question from Shri Tanvi Chakrabarti in the chat box, which is, I think, open to all the poets. She's talking about women poets in general. So each of you can, talk about this particular, your opinion on the subject. So we'll come back for this question answer session. While we move on to Nishi Pulugurtha and what she thinks about place and how she connects her poems with place. Over to you, Nishi.
Thank you so much. As I was listening to all of you read Bhumika, Smitha, Paulami, Tansy, I couldn't but note the kind of connections that each of your works makes with one another. When Boshudara had circulated the program schedule, and she did speak about how our poems, we would see how our poems were in conversation. And I was wondering, I haven't read all the poetry. I've just read a few poems by Paulami from Paulami's book. So I was a bit apprehensive of what am I going to talk about there. But as I listen to all the four of you read, I see that there are several connections that we make where place, where people, where language, where culture, each of us are talking about this. The way we are talking about it, the images that we use, the connections that we make are very different. But we seem to be kind of talking about the same kind of things, the various, multiplicity of cultures and language, of people that we encounter, of places that we've been in physically, or places that we heard about and kind of have recreated them in our minds. So that's something which struck me very, very strongly this idea of whether I mentioning the place anywhere in my poem or in the book, or whether I am not. I think there is a strong sense of place, whether it's Tansy writing her poems or whether it's Bhumika. And with Smitha and Paulami, we have the name specifically mentioned in the title. But even for the other three of us who don't have the names mentioned in the title, the place names, the place is very, very much there. And I think that kind of links all of us. And I think that would bring up, here with Sritoni's question, where she talks about this attachment to place. I think the attachment to place and the kind of attachment to place that one could have could differ, actually. I mean, you can be attached to a place as a tourist. You can be attached to a place as someone who has lived in that place for a long time. You can be attached to a place in memory. You've not lived there at all, but you've just been there for some time, or you've heard about the place, and the place remains with you. It could also be just the place, the space within a home or within your work. Even that could be the place that each of us are talking about. It need not necessarily be a different kind of place where one actually travels to. The travel could be travel within the city to work, or it could be an imaginary kind of travel. So I don't think there is a sense of conflict, unless, of course, I'm bringing in several other issues into the poem, which could then give rise to the conflict. But I think when I'm talking about an attachment to a place, there is a difference in the way I am dealing with it. I don't think that we do believe, yes, we do belong somewhere, yes. Each of us have our own ideas of belonging to a place, to a home, or to a city. And, there are different ways in which we react to that sense of belonging as well. I mean, I've been here in Trivandrum for 1 month, and I do have a very strong sense of belonging to this place. It's the first time I have been here for such a long time. So I think it's how one responds to it. So I really, to Sritoni's question, I think there's no sense of, I don't feel a sense of conflict when I am looking at a place or inhabiting a place or reacting to that place, and whatever be the nature of the place or my connection with it could have. And the other thing that I found very interesting among all of us is the way in which various aspects of life, whether it be a word that Smitha spoke about, ayo, which is, it's sort of not even a word, so to speak. It's an exclamation kind of a thing, or the kind of words that Bhumika has just spoken about, or the kind of images that Tansy and Paulami have been talking about. These are images which we find in the world around us, and that's something that I found common to all of us. Our reactions to them, our presentations of them are very different, but all of us are actually talking about life, its anxieties, its various issues, its happiness, its sorrows. So I was I was fascinated. I'm so glad that this particular event happened, because as I was listening to all the four of you read, I could actually find these connections between all our poetry. We have all located in very, very different places, and all writing at various points of time, but I do find connections between all our writing, and that's, I think, something that one finds when one is reading a lot of poetry as well. I'll just read 2 poems, short ones. The first one is called Little Ones at Play. Stuck in restricted spaces, the little ones find some place to play, jump, laugh. The quietness disturbed by their joy. An old lady and an older gentleman out too, out under the blue, grey, dark sky, out in the open, restricted by walls. Walls that are needed, boundary walls, walls that one leans onto at times. The other poem that I would like to read is called The Photograph of Sour Mangoes. An old photograph, well, not that old, looks at me from the screen. green sour mangoes on a cart to be sold, arranged artfully. A few cut, the vendors' art at work, some of them sprinkled red. Childhood visits, playing with friends, so many stories interwoven of a wonderful trip, of the tufts of sky that colored the blue, the gentle sea breeze, crowds thronging, the scorching sun, the tricolored waters, orange and white, orange and white flowers tucked into women's hairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Nishidi, for talking about these very vibrant connections that I guess all of us have been noticing, and for articulating them so well. So, with the same question, we move on to Paulami and her ideas. Yes, Paulami, over to you.
Uh, Thanks, Boshudhara. Regarding place and belonging, I would agree with Nishidi because I see belonging as, concentric circles. So when I belong to a place, maybe I belong to my hometown where I spent 20 years, or I belong temporarily to a neighborhood where I've lived for 3 to 4 years. So if I am attached to both these places, and the intensity, varies according to time, place, and experience, I don't see a conflict there. And as far as writing is concerned, I find it easier to anchor my poetic responses when I think about a place. So in my book, there's a series on Patel Nagar, plus there are other poems which are either titled, with various names of various places, or I have written on a place, or I have written about an experience which I had somewhere, but the name of the place does not feature in the poem. So I think that is how I would like to respond to the question regarding belonging to a place and responding it to that feeling through poetry, and also answering Sritoni's question, where she has asked whether being attached to some place raises any kind of conflict. No, in my case, it does not create any sense of conflict. I would just read a poem. This is titled My Bag. A song for my shoulders to help me muscle down the subway without pushing strangers. My bag has baggage of other bags and places I traveled with them. Then there are always exits planned. In case of a tremor, a riot, or a tear, I will grab this womb of documents and run. So I think this kind of sums up what I feel about, belonging to a place temporarily or permanently, and always in that sense of transit, or that feeling of movement. I'm not saying instability, but movement, that I might have to leave this place too. Okay, I'll read my second poem. This is titled Terrace. Mud prints draw me. I see them drawing water out of a well as I step out of the lift. Your door opens with light at the end of this passage. The air inside smells like terrace. I know this arithmetic. The space is mine. The feet are mine. You who look distant are also mine. Let us take the stairs now and look at the ramshackle sky. Can I read one more?
Yes, certainly.
Okay. I wrote a poem during the pandemic. It's titled Ready. Ready to move into a new house, My wardrobe, wrapped in cellophane, looks like a corpse. So do the fridge and the table when the workers load them safely on the truck. I watch them from a distance, wrapped up in layers like a corpse. Ready to move into a new world, people dig deep into parks and markets. Home pyres keep burning. Ready to move into a new day, I brush my teeth and rinse my mouth, slip into somnolent shirts, and stare at ambulances like a corpse. Thank you.
Thank you, Paulami, for these wonderful poems. And yes, they speak to all of us. That perpetual transit, the perpetual thread, it connects with Bhumika's ideas of the apathy of people and the possibility, the precariousness of existence. So we move on to Smitha, who has already spoken about Malabar, but yes, I would like her to contextualize a little more. Yes, Smitha, over to you. And yes, Paulami, there's a question in the chat box from Kabir, a fabulous poet and critic himself. So you'll have to contemplate on the question when we come back for the next round. Yes, Smitha, over to you. Smitha, can you hear us? You have to unmute.
Yes.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's a very wonderful question, but very difficult to answer because it is very contextual. When I look at Sri Tanvi's question, whether attachment to a place and detachment from place can give rise to intense sense of conflict. I'm reminded of two images here. When I was young, um, we used to have nomads, coming to a town, staying for a while, setting up their campfires, their tents, and they would hang, cots of, they would hang cots for the babies, rock them to sleep, and after a while they would go away. So what one noticed about these people was mostly the women, very colorfully dressed in their, ghagras, and so what is the kind of sense of belonging they would have had? They would have had a sense of belonging to every place they went to, is it not? Similarly, now contextually, also speaking from viewpoint of Kerala, I'm also a gardener, so I would say that pepper plant, you cannot transplant the pepper plant to a place like Delhi because Kerala has its different weather, the tropical sun, the sea, the sand, the temperament. So it is important, if a pepper plant has to survive in the weather of Delhi, it must keep alive the memory of tropical sun. So it's very difficult to give a straightforward answer. But I will read from one of the poems. My poems have been mostly inspired with memories of sea, sand, and sun. So one of the poems, the title is "We Slept Floating on Leaves." This poem is centered on the creation of Kerala. So the poem goes like this. When it rained for 7 days and nights, sea came up, swallowing grey shoreline, unfurling waves of memory of beheaded mother. Beyond asphalt road, separating the ilk of the sea from the ilk of land, reclaiming those days. Fish swam under guava trees in our courtyard, gossiping, pausing, tasting fire-cooked grain. Sand washed pristine in the primal state of seabed, of corals, of clammed secrets. We slept floating on leaves, dreaming within a dream, water flooding our lungs, limbs opening into petals, growing into the night, the shadow of fish eclipsed blood moon. Carrying earth in its womb, this land claimed from the sea by unquenched rage of burning ice, axe dripping blood, feet in long strides, of 21 parikramas of Vishnu Puranam. Afterward, we slept floating on leaves. So, well, this is to bring together the tropical sun, sand, and sea, which makes me me.
Would you like to read another poem, Smitha?
If there is time, otherwise.
Yes. And Tansy, there's a question in the chat box for you from Kabir, so you can contemplate on it. And if you wish to answer when it's your turn, you may. And for everyone, there's a question from Anita Nahal as well. So you'll have to take that also into consideration. So I guess we'll come back for another round of question answers. Yes, Smitha.
Yes. So the title of the poem is Song of Sea. Inside my conch shell ears, sea calls, come back to salt. The nothingness of dark trickles into dawn, wading rain, collapsing on sand, outstretched legs. A cluster of spiked grass blown around by the wind. Come to read. Come to gather pine cones. Lying down by the sloping earth, froth washing over toes, crab burrows into a dark home. In scriptures of time, the sea is born 40 minutes past 6 on a rainy dawn under Antares. Tempestuous loom spins, treacherous undercurrents, ashes and bones in the thunderous roar. Salt breeze licks empty shells, the confluence of unrequited love. Cape of Coromandel. Wet dawns of crab month offer prayers to the departed. The sea is almost green, breaking waters of illusions beneath and beyond. There is only an abyss. Call her by any name, Arabian, Andaman, Mediterranean. She whispers in my conch shell ear, come back to salt, come to read, come to gather pine cones. Thank you.
Beautiful, beautiful. Thank you, Smitha. And over to you, Tansy, to what you think about place, your connections, of course, and these questions, if you choose to address them. Over to you.
Oh, thank you so much. Oh, this conch shell ear is just haunting me now. It's so beautiful, such an amazing image. Right, I'm going to try hard to kind of find strands from all the different questions and answer them all together. In terms of conflict, hearth, home, motherhood, these are really interesting questions to answer and think about as a mother. And I think since I have been a mother, there has been a sense in which everywhere that I inhabit has had to be home very quickly in order to create a sense of security for a child. It has happened to a lesser degree as a teacher over many years, but as a kind of physically childbearing woman, I think that suddenly the sense of the oikos and the hearth becomes all important. I'm quite intrigued by this idea that women as homemakers and as breadwinners, you know, kind of take this notion of the hearth and the home as an economic prospect as well. I think that the word oikos in ancient Greek actually does link to economy as well. And I think women start to become much more dynamic and powerful, if allowed to be, when they have families to look after, when they have people in their care who they absolutely have to protect. And a sort of fierceness comes about, which maybe is there latently as a daughter, as a grandchild, or as a child. But it really kind of comes into its own when one is having to protect a next generation. I feel, this is a personal opinion. And I kind of wanted to come to this poem that Kabir Dev has kindly suggested I read, called Small Comfort. And this was written much before I was a mother, a really long time ago, when I was feeling very much the pressures of just being a daughter rather than a fully empowered woman, if you like, and very much at the mercy of the matriarchs of my family. So this came about, I remember, all in one go as I was walking through a very suburban park in London. There was a railway bridge in that park, and under that railway bridge was graffiti scribbled all over the walls, and you could just see through this very dark railway tunnel a light and a great greenness and a kind of verdure at the other end of that tunnel. So this inspired the poem Small Comfort. It was a neighborhood in which I felt very connected to, or at least identified with, because it was the place where my grandparents' house was, and I'd been going to their house ever since a very baby. However, there was a sort of resistance to that place as well. There sort of an edginess to feeling pulled back there, and I didn't altogether feel very comfortable with that location and that place that I felt karmically I'd been kind of induced to connect with, but I didn't necessarily want to be there very much. So this small comfort, where I was feeling sort of at my wit's end about being still in suburbia of London, so why was I still having to be in this very odd, to my mind, quite small-minded place, when I had so many places to explore and I wanted to go to so many places and do so many things. This Small Comfort poem came about, so I think it's maybe relevant to the questions. When the headache threatens and the heart can bear no more, when the baby's screaming because an ogre's at the door, in the shadow of disaster, when another looms its head, nothing for it, lovely one, time to go to bed. So what have we got to put in the pot? Save us all from that same end, the shove that pushes over the edge to gently round the bend. I'll throw my arms around your heart and kiss that drooping eye, though sure that you've been rescued, you may never quite know why. I'll squeeze each trouble till it bursts in evanescent fear, and while you sleep, I'll whisper low a blessing in each ear. So what have we got to put in the pot? Save us all from that same end, the shove that pushes over the edge to gently round the bend. Hush now, in the chirrup and the dandelion's breath, to the gossip of graffiti by my simple, happy death, as the lotus opens wider and the crisis sighs its last, when everything that holds lets go, the way ahead is vast. So what have we got to put in the pot? Save us all from that same end, the shove that pushes over the edge to round the unknown bend. And the unknown bend for me was India, indeed. And thank you so much, Kaviji. And I did feel that the lotus and the visions and the memories that I had of India kind of kept me going through suburban grey London, and coming back to India and living here and making my family life here has actually really contributed to a sort of renaissance of words. So to kind of bring all those ideas to a conclusion, I feel that words have been the link of places for me, and poetry in particular, but also, you know, words in all their forms and the stories that we weave from place to place. They're really my security blanket. They're really the places that I carry with me. And having this sense of text and textile and texture, these are all things that keep me safe and allow me to create homes, whether they be in Rohtak with the birds, or in Delhi with the street kids, or in Manali with the gypsies, or wherever we happen to be in the world. There is this connection through the interweaving of all those adventures and experiences through collections of poems or collections of essays or stories or whatever happens to evolve at that time. So I think maybe as women, and maybe as women poets, maybe one of the reasons we're all here tonight is to kind of share that beautiful tapestry of words and of imaginative adventure and all the brilliance and power and sometimes despair and crisis and everything that comes out through our our lives as women of this world. So I thank you all very, very much for sharing this space, and thank you so much, Vasudhara, for hosting a beautiful, beautiful event.
Thank you for your beautiful reading and for all the comfort that these poems are bringing us this early winter evening, you know. So we have had a wonderful round of discussions, a wonderful round of readings, and we come back for addressing these questions that our very kind and engaging audience have offered us here. So I think I'll begin with Bhumika. Bhumika has questions to answer.
Thank you. First, I'll try to engage with Kabir Dev sir's question. It's very interesting. Well, as far as speaking about something or writing about or researching, whatever, in whatever ways we choose to articulate, we must be aware, I believe, of the place of privilege we inhabit. I cannot, which is also what led to me writing the poem, Jumbled Sentence Stories, whether we are, putting words in their mouth, whether we are aware of the limitations of our understanding of how much we can fathom the pain. With that observation, we try to empathize, but we cannot speak for them. But it's also very strange how many times, whether it's, a riot, whether it's, somebody's death or some mishap, many of us just write, scribble down something and about the event itself, about the person, about the tragedy. But are we trying to literally take pleasure, in a certain way by looking at it and trying to use it for our own ends? Now, these are some of the questions that I engage with in my head. I'm trying to express them. I'm not really sure if I've been able to answer your question, sir, but yes, I do believe that whoever it is, a researcher, a writer, should be able to understand the place of privilege they inhabit when they write or express themselves in any form.
Right, yes. And I believe that there are other questions here. There's a question for Paulami again from Kabir. So Paulami, you'd like to address this?
Hello. First of all, I would like to say that I'm happy to see Kabir here, and he's a very good critique. And thanks for the question. So the way I see it is, I mean, whether I'm writing about small towns or whether I'm writing about cities, I mean, I would not like to, make a movement out of it. I mean, it should come naturally. With the question that Kabir is asking, that we have seen poets and essayists like Monindra Gupta who make small instances of smaller towns very believable and authentic. Yes, if we consider it as normal that I can write about any place or write about any issues. There are a few topics, like if I write about a political conflict or a social issue, there, that strain should be there, that it is a movement, I'm trying to raise awareness. But not all kinds of topics require that kind of alacrity. Like we should not write only about cities, we should write about small towns also. In this case, I think, when Kabir is saying not to leave the trash visible, I mean, for me, the trash would be that anxiety in me that I am angry. Why is this place being written about and why is that place not being written about? If I do away with that, I can make everyday occurrences, everyday experiences, wherever it takes place, authentic and believable. That's all.
Yes.
Just a
We
moment.
have a question. Yes.
Sorry, I think I missed out on Anita Nahalman's question.
Yes. I was coming to that. Yes.
I'll just very quickly engage with that question. She's asked about belonging and coming home. Well, in my case, it is about coming home to a space, to a world where people perhaps will not one day be so very disconnected, will not engage with the world in very measured, calculated moves, and hopefully the stagnancy or the rot will reduce and wounds will heal. So in that sense, my idea of a home is the idea of healing. So I hope I've been able to engage with your question. I'm not really sure, but it's something which has pushed me to think along certain lines and in certain directions. In fact, both Kabir Dev sir's question and Anita Nahal ma'am's question, thanks to both of you for your points of view. Thank you. Over to you, Paulami Sengupta.
Yes, I would invite Nishidi, Paulami, Smitha, all of you to engage with Anita Nahal's question, since this is an open question.
So she's right in some ways. Yes, it's about belonging, coming home, but it's also about going out, about reaching out, particularly when you are talking about protest poetry or when you're using poetry as activism. You are going beyond yourself, beyond your comfort spaces, and reaching out to people and talking about certain things which definitely are disturbing but need to be put out there. So when I'm doing something like that, I'm moving out of my comfort zone, because I think then what I'm talking about, that particular issue that I'm talking about, is something very important. So it's not just only about home, belonging, or being in a comfortable space. We're also talking about these uncomfortable spaces around us, uncomfortable zones around us, which need to be spoken about, because they are very important in every aspect that we see around us. I hope that answers Anita's question.
Yes, Smitha, your take.
Yes, Vasudha, very good question. I'd like to say that poetry travels in time. So it's not only about belonging to a place, as Nishi ma'am has rightly said, that you have to be in the uncomfortable spaces also, which brings out, the activist poetry, the poetry which empathizes with others, the poetry which raises its voice against oppression. For all of this, we have to be in uncomfortable spaces. So comfort can be lulling, but at the same time, I think that uncomfortable factor is important to fire us up to write, to raise our voices. That's all I would say.
Paulami, Tansy, you would like to say something?
Yeah, I do actually totally agree with Smitha here. There is a sort of urgency to the human condition, especially at the moment. I mean, maybe it's always been thus, but it does feel that right now there are so many crises to respond to, and that kind of uncomfort and discomfort means that we can become, if we find our voices and we know how to use them, it empowers, and it means that we have something to work with along with the discipline and the logic of language. I love this idea that Bhumika says, I want the words to make somewhere safe for the future, because I feel that, yes, this is very much part of the whole journey, is to recreate a future in which to bring our children and everybody's children into a safe place for the future. One very important reason for using our voices wisely and strongly. And just to answer this question, Kabir Dev's question about whether the nomad poet must keep some sense of identity, of poetic identity from the original place in order to kind of remain alive. I do understand that concept. However, I feel that we live in a world now in which everybody is on the move, and all of our voices are very global, and raising very global issues. So for me, this idea of a kind of poetic sisterhood is particularly resonant and strong right now. And I love the fact that so many women's voices are being raised in very powerful protest, and not aggressive protest, but very peaceful, and all the stronger for that. So in response to Kabul falling a couple of years ago, I wrote a haiku, and this haiku, I'm just going to end with this, if you don't mind. The haiku is not just a simple 3-line poem, but it's actually 4 verses of haiku, and it's for our Afghan sisters, and it's called a nomadic haiku. To walk takes vigor, tremble the academies, we approach by night. Caves now hide our beds, roar the jungle wilderness, nocturnal our eyes. Parting, when we meet again, all one. Ours is not to configure dates, only go beyond the man-drawn borders, stamps, seals, locking in our dreams. Thank you so much. I hope that explains the answers to the questions.
Thank you, Tansy. And I think that brings us to the conclusion of a very, very beautiful evening. So your haiku is almost the final word on the subject. And just to, because my co-host has missed the first part of the session, but he joined in quite soon, and he hasn't spoken to all of you. So to deliver the vote of thanks, the formal vote of thanks, I would like to call upon Professor Jaideep Sarangi. Jaideep, over to you.
Yeah. I hope I'm audible, no?
You're audible, yes.
Yeah, thank you. I shouldn't have a prosaic disturbance when the poetry is flowing, isn't it? And 5 wonderful voices, and 5 wonderful books by Red River, and Bhumika, Nishi, Paulami, Smitha, and Tansy. It's really wonderful to listen to poets when they read out, and when they read out in continuum, without any prosaic or critical disturbance by a critic or someone's intervention. What is very special, I'm tempted to say that, already spoken by some of you, the place connects you all. That is very wonderful link, that the place that you have situated the book, and most of the poems are linked to this place, and the questions are mostly addressed on that direction. And we always carry a baggage of our spaces we live, and the place is where your feet are, isn't it? We carry our feet wherever we travel. And as Anita Di, actually, I was looking into the question of Anita Di, diaspora, in a crossroad, whoever is sitting in different parts of the world within the country, when the movement is a true movement, geographical, political, as well as poetic. But what I like is that all 5 have transmitted their energy into poetry, and that is through a beautiful language system. And that language system, I'll say, I don't want to use the word linguistic, that is more critical, or prosaic, which is a kind of hindrance to the sweet flow of poetry. And the images created by 5 amazing artists from different backgrounds really mean a lot. And I wish these books will be read widely, and these books will travel fast and fair. And what a lovely experience for anyone to listen to poets reading, and reading uninterruptedly, isn't it? Without any interruption. So I'm mesmerized, and thank you for giving the Hearth Within this opportunity to launch your books and have a discussion on that. I'm so sorry. I was traveling. I can't open the camera on also, but it was wonderful experience to listen to all of you, and you made the evening very, very poetic and very special. And thank you, Bashodhara, and all who are the supporters of the Hearth Within. We want to bring the poetry at the heart of all our hearts. We are all the soul makers, and thank you, all soul makers who support the Hearth Within. Write more, give us an opportunity to read more. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Joydeep and Boshudhara.
Thank you. Thank you all. Wonderful voices and wonderful images that you have done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And this brings us to the, I would not say conclusion, but it brings us to the kind of close of a very beautiful evening. And this will open again. Every time we open one of these 5 books, we'll be reminded of the conversations. And I was tempted, when in the beginning I was planning this event, I was tempted to use the word women somewhere in the title. But then it's very, politically incorrect to call someone a woman without finding out whether they actually subscribe to being women or not. So I removed the word woman and I introduced Guftagu, which has got there's certain feminization to the word. So the idea of gossip, the idea of community, the idea of collectivity. So without using the word women anywhere in the title, I thought that there would be a sense of camaraderie when we talk about Guftagu. And I'm very, very happy and very grateful that this has been a Guftagu, and the ideas which have come in have not come in intellectually, they have come in into the heart, and they'll stay there. And I hope generate more poetry, fresh critical perspectives, and more reading widely. So thank you once again for a very, very beautiful evening. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Give us another opportunity in future as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Basudhara. Thank you, Sarangi sir, Nishi
Thank
ma'am,
you.
everyone.
Thank you.